folks.
Jeff, can
Yeah,
you tell me what you were looking for? Sorry, I had a member call.
yeah, just closed captions. Is it possible to enable captions? Holly mentioned it might be in the more section, but I'm not seeing it in there unless I.
Well, closed captions are normally an extra expense. So let me see if we're still paying for that.
Okay, okay. Well, while we do that, I'm gonna get the conversation going, and we'll see what we can do here. Okay, awesome. So, the first question for everyone here, again, a tradition that we carry here at Geckos, we ask every speaker, what does gender justice mean to you? So, whoever wants to go first, what does gender justice mean to you?
I guess
Yep,
I could start us off here.
awesome.
I guess for me, gender justice, that's hard to say, it really involves challenging the systemic issues and conditions that allow people to be targeted because of gender identity or gender ideology. So these definitions and these norms that we attach to a gendered word that then allow for harm, whether that's physical violence or other types of social harm. And so I think gender justice is all about kind of taking shared accountability and challenging norms and systems and laws.
That's awesome. Yeah, great. I think that was a great example. If you either of you want to add to that, or you don't have to, but yeah, go ahead, Allison. Go ahead.
I think for me, gender justice is really wrapped up in gender liberation. And as part of that, sort of the liberation of all folks. And that involves, decolonizing our minds, our societies, so that the sort of strict gender roles and norms, as Holly was saying, we can really sort of pull those apart and create a society where people are really free to live exactly as they are.
Awesome. Awesome. Wonderful.
For me, gender justice means accountability in systems that often ignore the voices of those who are most vulnerable. About recognizing how deeply inequality is and how violence affects the lives of everybody. And for me, it's both very personal and professional. And it's like how I show up, how I use my voice, how I challenge systems, systems that keep women and gender diverse people and those who are most vulnerable from being seen or heard.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. And well, anyone who's joining us, welcome aboard. We're talking about building bridges across differences and the work we can do to help end gender-based violence um, across the greater London area and across the province. And we have an incredible group of panelists here joining us. And I'm going to, of course, as a cis male, going to take a moment here. Please apologize in advance. I'm just going to take up a little bit of space here in a moment to introduce a topic. So I'm taking a bit of a journey to get there because I have to bring up I am not everyone's into sports, but I am a diehard Blue Jays fan. And for a lot of folks who watch that series across the land, a lot of folks are in a place of grieving. Of course, we're just talking about people running around on a field in their pajamas in the grand scheme of things, but there is great conversations. What's exciting is folks have been talking about what it is to navigate grief and defeat together, with your love of the game of baseball, a game that sometimes doesn't love you back. And thinking about when sports culture doesn't love you back, the sport of hockey, a beloved sport across this land, that can be a sports culture that doesn't love all of us back. And we think of not just those hockey players involved in causing harm with the Hockey Canada incident that we've, just it's been the big headline this year. And of course, it's even more than just EM. Of course, we rallied for her from coast to coast, and we're grateful for her courage. It's bigger, and she'll acknowledge this, right? That was bigger than her. It's bigger than what those young men did, the harm they caused. This is about people of all genders, but in particular women and young women who have suffered abuse, hurt, and harm um, within the spaces of hockey culture. And of course, that extends to, hazing rituals for young men and boys as well, for sure, and harm throughout our communities. Looking back at 2025 and the aftermath of the Hockey Canada trial and verdict, the ordeal of EM and those of so many survivors whose stories have surfaced. I remember reading stories, women across decades, generations, talking about harm they've experienced from male athletes. Um, for the panel, would love for you all to reflect for us upon the experiences that you had both personally and professionally this year with your respective teams, your organizations, and the extended community and your colleagues who have done tireless work around gender-based violence. Just looking back at this year, just reflections on what it's been like and what we've been through. Whoever wants to go first, once again.
Are you okay if I jump in?
Mm.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, Jeff, I just want to not compare the Jays to hockey right now, because I feel like even this is so basic, but Vladdy showing up pre-game wearing that Hockey Canada um the women's team jersey,
Yeah.
that is such a basic example of how baseball and hockey are very different. I know there are similarities and problems and all of that as well, but that's such a empowering statement for Vladdy to make, especially for young boys watching, to say you can show up wearing this any jersey you want, anything you want. And I think that was really cool. But hockey, so I want to just start by saying the London Abuse Women's Center and Inova came together really quick to show our support for EM outside of the courthouse when she was testifying. And we showed up every morning that she was on the stand with signs that said, "We believe survivors." And Allison, you actually led the calls of, what do we want? Justice. When do we want it? Now. And we really wanted to show EM that she wasn't alone. And she knows that, which we're truly grateful for. And I think we know that for any survivor, that this process is daunting and grueling and wildly traumatic. And I think a big part of the work that we do is to show women that they're not alone. I mean, I was personally in the courtroom for about 15 days, usually alongside of whether it was Allison or somebody else from Inova. But every single day that EM was on the stand, and including after and verdict day, and we got to see all the courtroom shenanigans, from the 2 juries being dismissed to the blame that was put on those that were rallying outside for making the hockey players walk the gauntlet. The judge even said at one point that the phrase "believing women" was not, or did not have a place in her courtroom. So the unfortunate thing is that for me, and so for the work that we do at the London Abused Women's Center, that leaves us with a lot of pieces to pick up. So we work so hard to build trust within our systems for women that choose to use them. So whether, that's using the legal system or the criminal justice system or reporting to police or whatever that is that they choose to do, now we have to work harder, right? And women and those who have been subjected to violence really and truly deserve to be believed. And it almost felt at the end of that at the end of the trial that now that's on us to fix that problem, right? We already have such a big job to do. A lot of our organizations are grossly underfunded and wildly stretched. And now we kind of had to pick up the pieces from that. And so it was a very difficult time for a lot of people, but one of the, I don't want to say silver lining or good things that came out of it, but because that's not at all what I mean, but coming together as a community and seeing the rallies out front of the courthouse growing every day that we were there, and hearing from people across the country and receiving donations from different individuals across the country to Our organization was something that I will honestly never forget. And it was, you know, like I said, I don't want to say silver lining. That's not at all what I mean, but it felt hopeful, as awful as it felt at the same time.
Yeah, I think for us at Inova, and again, we were there with Jen and Locke every day that EM was on the stand, as well as a number of the other days. And I think it was one of those things that really does just like sitting in the courtroom day in and day out and watching the system do what the system does really sort of changed the brain chemistry, as my executive director has been saying often about that trial, of like, EM went through a horrible trauma that night 7 years ago, and then she went through a whole new other trauma navigating our criminal legal system. And I really think that holding that and being able to recognize that it's not just about the trauma of sexual abuse, sexual violence, but really the trauma of our systems and institutions that uphold not only the violence she experienced that night, but then continued to inflict harm on her through the shenanigans of the courtroom, through 9 days of cross-examination, where 5 teams of defense lawyers were questioning her, were laughing at her at moments, chuckling at her. I really think that it is emblematic of how far our legal system is from a justice system. And the foundations that our criminal system was built on, I think, are really not aligned with what survivors need, what victims of sexual and gender-based violence often need. And so, as Jen said, then we're sort of left as organizations and communities to fill those gaps and to see how else we can help survivors access justice, access healing outside of those systems that really have always failed us and have not stepped up in the way that they need to make those changes.
Yeah, I think you know, to add to, so the courthouse, I wasn't able to be in the courthouse, but I was able to be on those steps with those groups of people rallying. And I will agree with everything said, so I'll try to say something different, which is, you know, that complex feeling of grief and almost impending doom. Had a lot of conversations with people about the precedent that this case could set, and how it can be a really negative one or a really positive one. And unfortunately, we did not get the really positive one. And so I think there was a real heaviness. I know myself and my team felt it. And one thing I noticed in the community in conversations I was having was a real divide. A lot of people approached it with great empathy, and then a lot of people approached it with a lot of victim blaming, rape myths, things of that nature. And so I think that it's a moment to pause and reflect on, you know, what in our society is allowing these things to persist. And I think that it's very connected to our hockey culture, our glamorization of hockey culture, the kind of forcing of you know, celebrity on certain people, and pretending that that makes it okay for them to treat someone however they want. So there was a lot of shocking things that came out of that. I think at the same time, like Jen and Allison are kind of describing, that community mobilization was really nice to see. And it really made me think, similar to what Allison was saying, how you know, what's illegal is not in line with what's right and wrong always. And we have a lot of ways to go in terms of just because it's not illegal does not mean that it's consent, does not mean that it's safe, does not mean that it's okay. But also the lack of accountability. At Changing Ways, that's really our focus. Like, how can we get people to take accountability for harm they've caused? And there was no accountability, right? It's very much let me minimize, deny, blame, anything that I can, rather than taking accountability for certain things. And there were so many moments of potential intervention from so many different people involved in that case. Just took one person to say, I don't know that she's comfortable, but you're not going to convince me she's comfortable. Let me walk her out of here and make sure she's safe. That didn't happen. And so it really makes me think about what that prevention education looks like for people to be able to stand up when something like that is happening and when something like that is normalized in a culture. Because this is not the first story we've heard of something like this, right? And getting covered up in that way.
Yeah, I I think an opportunity like this to have you all gathered with us, and of course, you are three of many folks. You represent your spaces and teams, but also the many other organizations and individuals who are doing incredible work this year. I think it's an opportunity for us to learn from and hear the realities for people who are joining us now or watching the recording of kind of what this experience was like. To dive in a bit more and as comfortable as you feel sharing, I'd love to hear both examples of the kind of pushback maybe that you witnessed or you personally witnessed, your colleagues, things you were seeing online, people were telling you about in particular, and I saw quite a bit of it on the trolling and stuff online in particular with men who were, you know, just arguing, denying, doubling down on supporting these guys no matter what, and all these different things, right? But also, were there conversations where you were pleasantly surprised? Were there experiences that you or colleagues had, or stories of hearing people? And I'd love, in particular men, but just any people of any genders coming to a place of awareness, light bulb moments, maybe just a bit of both, whatever you feel comfortable sharing. And I know this is like a panel and it's kind of we're online and these things are hard to kind of get comfy, but like feel free to like just if one of you is saying something to add to it, to jump in to whatever it is, okay? So yeah, anyone feel comfortable sharing like either of those maybe ends of the spectrum experiences?
I think I touched a little bit on the support piece, like receiving donations from across the country. Like that was really unexpected and obviously very appreciated. One of the things that did happen like at the courthouse was there were a group of men that showed up, and they were there a couple of times, but specifically they were there on verdict day, sitting right in front of us, which didn't really seem like it was by accident. And every single time a not guilty verdict was read, there were smiles and they would turn around and look at us. And it was awful, to be honest with you. And I think, that's probably like I don't want to say an extreme example, but I guess like that's like really one end of the spectrum of some of the stuff that happened. There are definitely people who were like not happy on our position about hockey in general. But I think I can't speak for everybody, but for our organization, there are always people that are not happy with our positions on things, whether it's somebody who's upset at us, supporting women, or talking about somebody who did something wrong and was in the news. Like there are always things that people say about what we do, but the hockey situation was definitely different. And that group of men definitely, again, that's something that I will never forget. And we did end up receiving emails after as well from people, saying that, now that we know the truth and now that we know that they're not guilty, and, and they had more to say. I'm not going to go into that, but, yeah, it was pretty extreme, some of the things that people did.
Yeah, it was gross. Yes, it was gross. And those same guys we had outside of the courthouse as well, a group of guys counter protesting, I guess. And I think what I struggled with that was this sort of media uptake of it, of like, oh, people are getting into it outside of the courthouse. And it's like, well, that's not the story. Actually, the story is EM and what's going on inside the courthouse. And it doesn't matter what three guys who can show up in the middle of like a Wednesday and stand outside all day, like their opinion isn't really relevant to this. If it was, then they would have been involved in the process, and they weren't. But I find that the sort of spin of like, well, there are two sides to every story, and like, let's hear out both people. And we don't always need to hear out both people. We don't, not everyone's opinion is relevant in a situation. And I think particularly in those types of moments, it highlighted for me that that our ability to speak out and say things was so important, because the sort of the other side, or how, you know, however you want to frame it, was speaking out, was very online, and very vocal. And so the importance of us being just as loud, and reframing things, speaking out, knowing too that EM couldn't. She couldn't, you know, hop online and write anything in defense of herself or her experiences. And so for us then being able to be online was really important. But then, of course, it attracted some of that negativity and some of those things of people who were kind of just wanting to fight. But as Jen pointed out, it also attracted a huge number of people who were in support of us and support of the work we were doing. You know, we had people travel from, there was a woman who came from Ottawa to be there with us the week that EM was on the stand. There was a hockey mom whose sons were like grown now, but she had been a hockey mom for years. And she came from a couple hours away because she just felt it was important for her to be there. Excuse me. So that support, I think, really made a difference.
I think for me too, you know, there was quite a few experiences that stood out to me. At one of the days, I had the opportunity to have a supportive listener button and kind of walked around and got to check in with people. And it was really interesting to hear what brought people there. And, you know, some of it was actually spurred on by the counter protesters. Like, oh, we heard they showed up, and so you know what, I'm going to show up too, because that's what we do. And so I think that a lot of people, you know, one of the comments I heard a few times that really stuck with me was people saying, this would have meant so much to me when I was going through this. That's why I wanted to show up today. And inevitably, when someone is brave enough to come forward and they tell their story, it does a few things. It makes us confront these facts that these things can happen. It makes us think about, what would that be like to be in that situation on either side? And I think that's what makes people really uncomfortable. I think people are uncomfortable with the idea that they could have crossed a line like that. And that was something that I saw in a lot of online comments, was people trying to justify with, who wouldn't get confused with something like that? Who wouldn't XYZ? And the answer is, a lot of people wouldn't, right? And so I think people are really uncomfortable with the idea that there could be penalizations to this. While at the same time, I feel like a lot of these people very uncomfortable that there wouldn't be. And so I think that what shocked me online, though maybe didn't surprise me, was these rhetorics trying to pick at her story, trying to pick at her character. And I didn't see that on the other side. There was nothing there going into their history, nothing going into their motivations, no kind of doubt built around these hockey players' intentions and actions. And I think it's just a stark reminder that we as a society have a picture of a quote unquote perfect victim. And if you don't fit into this perfect mold with perfect memory, perfect actions, whoever can define that, that you won't be believed and you won't be supported. And I think that's a horrible message to send to people because, again, that also takes accountability away from people. That's why we see so many vulnerable people being preyed on because there are not systems there to support them. And so I think that hearing that it was healing for some people was really nice, but then also hearing how many people needed that healing was really challenging. I was glad to see we did have a number of men on our side supporting us, which was also fantastic, and I think really, really helps. Because not only does it help our numbers in those situations, but it also helps show what it looks like to show up as an ally, to show up in a man in this work, to show up as a community member, and stand for what you believe is right, even if it goes against the grain of people around you, people in your workplace, that kind of thing. So I think that dichotomy was really interesting to see, but it definitely made the work feel heavy. When we are trying to talk about accountability and honesty and repairing harm, and then we see a system actively taking those opportunities away for a victim, that's tough to then come back and say, but we as people need to do X, Y, Z, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Just a reminder for folks who are watching with us, if you have any questions or comments, please add them in the chat, and we'll go to Shreya at certain points to see if there's any comments or questions to share with our super awesome panelists here. So earlier this year, I have my go-to Tim Hortons. Not everyone has to have a Tim Hortons that they go to, but I have a go-to Tim Hortons. And I drove up to it. And I live, for those who don't know much about the Toronto area, I live in closer to the Jane and Finch area. It's a pretty notorious, infamous priority neighborhood. A lot of newcomers, a lot of things going on. Unfortunately, continues to have a bad reputation, but it's a wonderful community, and but not the community you'd expect to find a Zamboni in the drive-through. I pull up to my Tim Hortons and I'm like, oh, there's a Zamboni in the drive-through. That's different. And then I look up at the Zamboni, and Sidney Crosby's in the Zamboni, and he's in full uniform. So they're recording a Tim Hortons commercial. And they chose to do it at this one. I was like, oh wow, they do it. They really do it at Tim Hortons. Wow, look at this. So I kind of drove around in kind of disbelief and also thinking, how do I get my coffee? And then I pull back up around the Tim Hortons, and all I guess the production staff and everything were kind of in a little crowd, and they all moved, and it was just Sidney Crosby standing there, and he was like 6 feet away from my car, and I was just looking at him, and he's in his full uniform, skates, no helmet, but everything else, right? Just kind of standing there. He looked at me for a second. He's like, "Who's this guy looking at me?" And I'm like, this is Sidney Crosby. What the hell? Like, I'm not a major fan or anything, but I know he is. And kind of what I reflected on later on was like, okay, so he's a human being. He's actually not a cardboard cutout. He's not a puppet. And I just think of how folks like Sidney, and forgive me if I'm wrong, and maybe he did say something, I just can't help think of the silence from, in particular, the hockey community, hockey players, retired, currently playing, coaches, staff, just the extreme silence from those spaces. Like I'm a pro wrestling fan, sorry, but Lance Storm from Calgary, a wrestler from Calgary, was very outspoken and critical of hockey culture and very supportive of survivors and EM on threads and Instagram. And that was one of the few male public athletic you want to, debate wrestling their athletes, but what are the few voices to kind of openly speak up and call out and name? So just to speak a bit on accountability and that silence, not just from the hockey community, but I imagine also from, like, who are some of the voices? You don't have to name names, obviously, and folks and shame people. I mean, if you want to, like, we're all here for it. I don't have tea in my water bottle, but I can sip along. But just in general, like that kind of the silence, which is not a surprise, obviously, but any reactions to that? Just like, where's everybody at? Like, I'm so thankful to hear that you mentioned a few men showing up, but the bar is so low, right, for us to actually show up and physically be there. But it is important. But any thoughts on that?
You know, I don't know if I have a hit list on this one, but there were a few, and I'm trying to recall now, but I can't specifically. But there was a few leaders in our community or people who made very neutral statements, which I thought was very interesting, right? I do understand that certain systems need to remain somewhat neutral and things like that, but when we have a city that's dedicated, has a pillar for protecting women, girls, and gender diverse folks, that's not a neutral stance, right? So, yeah, I think that it was that neutrality. And then, anyone with some local celebrity, I honestly feel like that platform needs to just be used. So I would have loved to see more comments. Something I was looking for personally was what are the takes of coaches? Because as someone who is not athletically inclined, and doesn't have a lot of coaches in that sense in my life, I am curious, how are you engaging young boys and, instilling some of these qualities of respect and authenticity? How are you instilling that? I would have loved to hear that. I would have loved to hear from people who are maybe doing the opposite, like doing that work alongside us to prevent. So that's kind of what immediately comes to mind. I'll let you know, Jeff, if I can think of a specific instance. There was definitely a few. I remember seeing a few where I thought, okay, that's not really a statement, but
Yeah, I mean, very disappointed in the OHL and in the Knights in particular, and that's not a secret. We wrote a whole statement about it while it was happening, that this trial was going on literally feet from their arena where they're there every day and practicing. And the players on the stand, some of them were not just previous OHL, but previous Knights. And there was not a peep. And then during the process, finding out that the on-site training that they were supposed to be taking every year, that they had really been sort of deprioritizing and tried to sort of pit, Inova and Locke against each other. Like, there was just some grossness there, where it was like, this is literally like, this is so incredibly relevant to you. And this is your time to like show people how committed you are to creating change in hockey and to creating safe environments for your players, as well as, London. And so I think that was a big disappointment for me and for us, to sort of see that silence, and the commitment to a performance of allyship that was not grounded in any actual activities, or any sort of dedication. It was really just, when pressed, the OHL said that they were committed to ending sexual violence, but there was no real follow through in that. And so it's kind of like, oh, okay, so you say the right thing, but like you're not actually committed to this. So that was a tough one.
Okay, I agree with everything that Allison and Holly said. I know that there were a few maybe well-known Londoners that came out. I know there was a local author that came out. Oh, did we lose Jeff?
We lost Jeff.
What do we do?
I think you keep answering. Keep going.
That's why Danny's also co-host, so he'll come
Okay.
back eventually.
Yeah, just
Okay.
keep answering.
All right. So, I think for me, it like really wasn't overly surprising that there was no statement from, public statement from like any politicians or mayor or city council or, whoever. And yeah, I think, it was just another one of those moments where it was on us to do what we needed to do and amplify the voices of survivors and organize and try to get, um, attention paid to, the work that we were doing, and the importance of listening to survivors and believing survivors and all of that. Yeah, so it wasn't overly surprising that there wasn't anybody that was speaking out and overly supportive about it. And we did ask some questions. I had reached out to the mayor and asked if there was going to be a statement made, and was told that there wouldn't be. They need to be. I'm not quoting this right at all, not word for word, but basically be careful because it's in front of a judge, and the City of London is involved, obviously, with some of the city councilors, and the mayor sit on the police board, and so they need to be cautious of what statements they make when there's something in front of a judge. And sure, understandable, but like you said, I think it was you that said that, Holly, about the strategic plan for the City of London. Like, we need to also take action. We can't just say that we're going to do these things. We need to take action. And so somebody making a statement about what was going on would have been nice, but not at all surprising that it didn't happen.
I think one of the things too that maybe spooked some people, certainly spooked us, was the judge threatened us, threatened the protesters when we had signs that said "We believe EM." She threatened to have people arrested for what was it, Jen? Disruption or messing with the jury.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly. Jury intimidation.
Jury
Something like that.
intimidation.
Yeah.
So standing outside the courthouse with signs that said "We believe EM" was jury intimidation. And the judge, threatened to have us arrested. So I think absolutely frustrating that people weren't speaking out. And also, kind of going back to the systems thing, the system is really not set up to support people speaking out. There are all sorts of legal repercussions that people can face, which then again, I think is why it's so important that we do it.
If I could just add in there, I will do like a nice list if we're doing our naughty list. There was quite a few influencers who I happen to follow, and they're not London-based, that covered this, and I think did a fantastic job. I just saw a new one come out, a well-known influencer who covers court cases. There's Professor Neil, right? I really liked the nuance they brought to those conversations, and that's where I think, as much as it's great to have some of these official leaders do some of this, it does set a tone. Even at that individual level, having these conversations with your family, with your friends. I know a lot of people were asking me my opinion, and if you ask me my opinion, I'll give it to you. So we were having a lot of in-depth conversations, and I think that can really make a shift. But I think that I did see a lot of social media influencers take that step, and I think maybe because there is that removal of some of those consequences that Allison and Jen are kind of alluding to. But we have also seen stances taken in similar cases. So I think of Kiara Agnew, if people know of her case. If anyone's curious, if you search Justice for Kiara, it should come up. And I had the privilege of meeting her aunt. And so this was a case with one hockey player. Her life was unfortunately taken. And so he was banned from local teams out in New Brunswick and things like that. So he was a hockey player. So their local teams took stances. They made very clear statements to the public. So it can happen, right? It can happen. I know Hockey Canada put in like, they might not be allowed, but they are, and they're playing now, right? So I think that again, it's thinking about the quality of those statements and is it followed with any real action? And I think that's what people are really looking for.
One of the worst feelings as a moderator is when your internet decides to go, nope, timeout. Like I was saying, Allison, I think you're frozen. You're frozen. It's like, no, Jeff, you're frozen. Oh, what am I doing now? So thank you. Thank you for keeping the conversation going. And again, folks, please, questions, comments, don't be shy to share them in the chat, and we can get them passed along to our panelists here. I wanted to not to derail or move away from the conversation of the Hockey Canada trial, but to add to that, in the midst of all that, it was not too long ago now. I saw the photos of the graffiti on that bridge in London, and just people feeling emboldened. Like I know these kinds of things are not new. You'd see them like in bathroom walls. People would scratch horrible things, but this felt like quite the statement in the midst of climate this year. Any thoughts about that? Because it's also, we've talked about already. I know like how a lot of this tends to be more online, that kind of trolling rhetoric, but we're seeing people feeling more and more emboldened to say things out in the open. Uh, yeah, any thoughts about that? I just want to throw that in there too.
I think I was pretty mad when I saw it, to be honest with you. Somebody, I think, texted me the social media post or something because somebody had posted it to social media. And by the time I got to it, City Councillor Rahman had already taken action, and like the it was already being removed the next morning. The police were aware, that sort of thing. And then we had reached out to the person that posted the pictures of it because there were hundreds and hundreds of comments on her post. And I was like, oh my God, are you okay? Like, because there were some good and some bad, right? And she was okay. And I think she was, happy that people had taken action. So that was great. But, it's not easy to see that. It's hate speech, especially on the tail of the hockey, like the tails of the Hockey Canada case. And it happened right before Take Back the Night. And Take Back the Night was like the first time we had ever organized Take Back the Night in a couple of years. And so it was very kind of hit close to home, for lack of a better way to say it. And like, for me, I'm like, oh my gosh, are there young kids on a school bus driving by this in the morning? Like, are they going to see it? And like, what does that feel like to those that have been subjected to violence? Who was the person that did this? Like, there were so many questions, right? But mostly I was mad at that point. I'm like, the audacity to do something like that,
Yeah, because I will let folks know I'm from the Toronto area. I'm not familiar with how trafficy that bridge is. If there's pedestrian traffic or a lot of cars, it feels like it's an area. This wasn't like on the back of some wall of some abandoned factory. This is right out in the open, broad daylight, where people are traveling to school, work, home, where they play, worship, whatever. And just seeing that, to me, it felt a bit strategic to put it right there. The intention was to kind of get that misogyny out there on a higher level. Any other thoughts? Just wanted to jump into it with that.
Yeah, I mean, to echo Jen, I was mad, big feelings. I woke up to a text about it. So that was kind of how I had started my day that day. And what I found almost as upsetting as the graffiti itself was the reaction to our response to the graffiti, which was, naming men's violence against women, which didn't feel like a leap to me to say that someone doing graffiti that says kill women and females should be hung, that's a man doing that, right? That's not a woman who's saying that about women. Didn't feel like that big a leap to me. But people having big feelings about that, very defensive of like, you don't know who did this. How can you blame men? You just hate men. You're making this political, I think was an accusation that we got. And so I think that it was another moment too of people's inability or unwillingness to really zoom out a bit. I think that it's so easy for people to say like that was one guy who did one thing, and then they say that about every one guy who does one thing, and don't sort of look at the pattern of what that is, which is you know, overwhelmingly men are the ones doing this type of violence. And women and gender diverse folks overwhelmingly are the ones experiencing it. And I think it's really important that we can say that and sort of acknowledge the reality of that, and also hold that that doesn't mean that it's only men. It doesn't mean that men never experience this type of thing as well. Like, we can hold the fullness of men are also victims of sexual and domestic violence and gender-based violence. Women can also commit that. Women can commit it against women, against men. Trans folks can do it against trans. Like, we can hold all of that. And also, we need to acknowledge that it's men's violence. And the real like anger and defensive-ness that people get when we say that, I think still really speaks to the disconnect, and the extent to which people are able to sort of other perpetrators, abusers, and say like, well, that's a bad dude. That one's bad. But, you know, as a man, I'm not bad. And, or as a woman, you know, the men in my life aren't bad though. My friends, my family would never do that. And I think the move towards gender justice, and the move towards a more just society in general, is acknowledging that no, we all cause harm in various ways. You know, hopefully we're not all graffitiing bridges, but we all cause harm. And I think that we are all capable of great harm, and distancing ourselves from that reality only helps to uphold systems that let perpetrators off the hook, and let people kind of get away with it. And we see that across the board, right? With statements of support for people who have been charged with things, the lack of belief that survivors face when it's someone in their community, when it's someone who's well respected, the idea that like, well, no, it could never be that guy, he's so nice to me, or even, you know, well, no, it could never be her because she's a woman wouldn't do that. Like, all of that we know is not true, but I think it's a way people have of comforting themselves, that they can hold this at a distance, and you can't hold it at a distance. It's right there with us.
Yeah, I think it's the entitlement that really, for me, like, it was immediate anger. It's like, really? So, and you're absolutely right, Jeff. It was fully calculated. Like, the spot was calculated, the handwriting maybe not, but it was also done at a time where no one could see them. Right? If you're really doing something right, you probably would need to do it in the middle of the night, right? So, I think that, you know, to bring it back to Take Back the Night, because I agree with everything said, and I think that we should be able to call out patterns that we see that are backed by data and statistics, because at the end of the day, when we're saying men's violence, we're talking about systems, and we're talking about patterns that everyone contributes to. Like, sometimes people will say that to me, well, women say this as well. Yeah, we all grew up in the patriarchal society that we live in today, and we need to unlearn these patterns. But when we look at where the violence is coming from, we got to talk about that. I think as a man, it's important to talk about that the same way as a white woman. It's important for me to talk about ways that white women contribute to harm to intersectional women and people, because I am in a space where I'm safe in that conversation. It's my job to challenge that. And I don't like the idea that I would be considered these things because of the way I look, but to challenge that, I got to challenge the people who are continuing to make that true, right? The statistics are there. And so that was my anger. But when we look at the impact, so Take Back the Night was right there. We were just about to do it. We had a big planning coordinating committee led by Locke and Anova. Actually, Gail and Nelia were fantastic chairs. And so I was in charge of the stage. I was in contact with all the performers. And that morning, I got an email from someone who was going to perform, and they said, "I'm so sorry. This has completely triggered my PTSD. I don't feel safe leaving the home. I do not feel safe coming to a public setting and sharing my story. I do not feel comfortable with any of this. I'm really, really affected." And so I connected with them, right? Offered support, all those things. But it was such a loss, such a huge sense of loss of here's someone with a beautiful submission that I had the privilege to read, a beautiful story to share about resilience, and then to have this happen. And I actually had people reach out to me because they knew I was going to be on the stage and asked, "Are you canceling? Are you guys going to have like more police protection? Do you feel safe being on the stage?" And I think that's because, especially with what we see happening down in the States, like all the political violence, people see this politically violent statement, and everyone, I think, in the back of their mind was thinking, is it safe to go? Right? Or is this some kind of like warning? Right? What is this really telling us about what's happening in society? So I want to make it clear that for anyone who maybe has that perception that like it's just words on a thing, like it's not that big a deal, it is, because this violence happens every day. This is not a hypothetical thing that women are going to be attacked and killed by virtue of being women or visibly women. This is a reality. And so people were deeply, deeply impacted by that. And I thought I would share what my mom said to me because I had a lot of feelings. Like this was literally right before we go on stage when we kind of uncover all this. And my mom said, "You know what? I'm so proud of you and your team," meaning like everyone doing Take Back the Night, because you're going to go up there and you're going to speak for people who cannot speak today because of what happened. And that really emboldened me to like, yeah, that's why we're doing this. So as much as it made me angry, it also made me think, yeah, exactly. That is why we do this, because it's not safe for everyone to get up there and share their piece. But we're going to keep making space and we're going to keep making noise and we're going to make it clear that like there is no room for that in our communities at all.
Just mindful of the time as we start to get to that point we need to wrap up. A few more questions for you. What lessons can communities across the province, across the land, take from what you folks and what you've witnessed in reaction to the events of this year? What do we need to get better at? What do we need to learn to get better at in what we're doing?
So I think in London, I feel bad. I'm just like jump in. I'm so sorry. Allison or
do it.
Holly, would you like, okay.
Do it.
Historically, London has been very siloed. I think over the past few years, we've been working really hard to work together. So I'm saying that in our sector, so violence against women, gender-based violence sector. Because like at the end of the day, we all want the same things, right? And I mean, I know I, for example, would love to work myself out of work. Like we do not want to have the London Abused Women Center existing anymore. And so that's really important. Like we don't need to be siloed. We need to be working together. And I think we are well on our way. We are building relationships and working well together. I think it's also very important to meet women where they're at. So just because, people might have different beliefs or values, or because somebody is making this up, like unhoused or has the biggest, most expensive house in the city of London, they both deserve the same amount of care, support, advocacy, concern. And we really and truly need to make sure that we're giving every single person that needs support equal opportunity for that. And also, we need to just do things. Enough talking about what needs to be done and really just take action. And so a good example, and it seems like maybe minimizing it, but it was actually really freaking cool when we were able to come together and get all those people to go outside the courthouse for the Hockey Canada stuff, right? And so it could be as small as that. And like, I don't mean to minimize it, but it could be as small as that, you know, but coming together quickly to do something, you know, stop talking about what you want to exist or the way a system should be, and start taking action toward doing it and get it done. And, you know, let's continue to make ourselves heard.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, echoing Jen, that coming together and just doing it, just doing the thing. And I think that's true, certainly within the sort of GBV sector, but I think even for folks who aren't sort of professionally involved, you can just do things, you know, like you don't have to wait for other people to change things. You can also make changes. And I think, you know, so I live right downtown London, and there is always lots of conversation in London about folks who are unhoused, and what the city is going to do about that, and what city councilors are going to do, or what specific organizations are going to do. And it's like, these people are my neighbors. Like, I can just give them money when I have money. I can do things, you know, I can make sure that the people who are my neighbors and are in community with me feel that community. And so, yeah, I think, like Jen said, with just do it, but I think that's true even if you're not sort of formally involved. Like, just do things. Being in community with people is not just a theory, it is an action. It's something you do. And it doesn't have to involve waiting for other people to formally get things started or to formally do things, you know. I think often of the idea that like we keep us safe is really, really true. That it's not the systems who are keeping us safe. It is the systems often who are causing or contributing to harm. And we are the ones who create safety. We are the ones who check in on each other, who send a text when something's going on, who reach out to, you know, someone who made a Facebook post and say, hey, are you okay? Those comments are wild. We can do that for each other, and you don't have to be part of an organization. You don't have to wait for someone with more power than you to do that. You can also do that. And the community, like community is who you're around. You don't have to agree on everything to get stuff done. Figure out what's in common and get it done.
Well, those are going to be hard to follow, but I would agree. I think our sector has been siloed, and I think this will really mirror a lot of different areas. And, you know, for us, I've noticed, especially in the last couple of years in this role, more acceptance of our role working with people who have caused harm, more acknowledgement that you have to, because at the end of the day, someone spray painted that bridge, someone crossed those lines, right? So what are we doing about people who are doing that? And I think, you know, one thing that's been so fantastic in collaboration is that we can do wraparound approaches. We can support everyone affected. We can support victims and survivors. We can also support people who are causing harm. But what about the people connected to all of them? What about the children and the school teachers and the friends who are really impacted by this? And no one can do all of it. And so when I can say, hey, have you heard of this service at Inova? And have you heard about Locke who does this? And have you thought of Muslim Resource Center or blah, blah, right? All these different places. I think that it really allows us to then give people what they need, but also learn from each other and learn, what does it mean when I say this? And what does it mean when you say this? And so I think that a lot of innovative things have happened in London, and it's been a real privilege to see them and be a part of them. And so I think that when we can acknowledge that we might have different perspectives or different approaches, but mirroring them or marrying them maybe is a way to combat some of this, because one approach is not always going to work for every situation. So I think that becomes really important. And I think that takes a lot of humility. So if you're like, how do I create this in my area? I think it's about being open, saying yes to whatever you can, being humble, being willing to, sometimes there are times where we think, are we the right person to step into this? Yes or no? We will. I'll show up wherever you ask me to. Right? But like Allison said, sometimes too, it's just about jumping in and seeing what you can do and who you can involve. And so I think that when we are willing to call out that violence, I think we also need to be willing to call people into those conversations and acknowledge that not everyone has had access to this information. Not everyone has had access to learning healthy coping skills, healthy communication skills, and that will never excuse the harmful choice, but it can help us see that roadway, that map to helping people choose better and do better. And so I think that it's a lot to hold in contention, like Allison said, like there's a lot of kind of moving pieces there. But when we can come at it with a perspective of, let me learn from you, let me work with you, we don't always have to agree on these things, but we're trying to get to the same place. So how do we get there? I think that's really important. And when I'm saying the same things, I usually find it's never something about like what actually needs to be done. In my experience, it's usually like, what's the word we use for something, or what's the order we do something. And I've seen in a number of communities when people start to, okay, you know what? Why don't we just focus on what the end goal is? And something really cool and innovative often comes out of that. And I've seen that happen in a number of communities that we work in, or projects that we've been a part of. And I think that that's important, because if we're talking about breaking like these gender norm roles, we have to kind of break our roles and scripts for everything, right? Like what it means to be a professional, what it means to be an ally, what it means to be in a community. We should be challenging all of that, because it's all gendered. And it's all hierarchical. And so we really need to look at that. And there's lots of conversations I hear about things like lateral violence and transformational violence, and these all exist. But we as people, and I love how Allison said that, we as people have the ability to actually resist some of that, resist the stigmas, resist the norms, and make something new. And I think that I've seen that in my work. I've been so appreciative to be invited into spaces, to find those spaces. Sometimes you got to knock on quite a few doors, but when you can get in there. And I just want to say, like, as a final thought to kind of that advocacy and change, I think it's so important to start it as early as possible.
Mhm.
We can be talking to children at literally any age about
Yeah.
things like respect and boundaries and equality and fairness. And it's uncomfortable, but it's so, so doable. And so opportunities I've had to work with children and parents have been so rewarding, because they ask you these questions. And if you're a parent wondering, like, can my kid comprehend this? I can tell you right now they do, because they're hearing these words, they're getting this information, and someone needs to talk to them about it, right? Someone needs to
Yeah.
give them that platform.
Yeah.
So I think that's been something that we're also silent in, is ages. And I think we need to find age appropriate ways, but we need to break some of those silos.
Y'all are rock stars. Really appreciate all your comments. Our co-ED Amanda, you wanted to jump in?
I just want to say a couple things. One, you are really rock stars. So thank you for coming. And Jen and Allison and Holly, I really appreciate all the work that you put in um, every single day to gender-based violence prevention. You are doing it well. I'm someone who's watching from the outside and looking in, Danny and I, and we always talk about how we as an organization aren't really doing work that's specifically related to gender-based violence. And we're always really careful to say that the reason that we're not doing it is because your organizations are already doing it so well. So we really do try to differentiate ourselves as a feminist organization. But what I'm hearing is so lovely, because even though you're doing gender-based violence and we're doing the promotion of gender equality, gender equity, gender justice, at the end of the day, we're all doing the same thing. And what I'm loving that I'm hearing is that we as an organization really want to elevate and uplift other organizations who are doing good work, because we're all doing the same thing. We're working, too many hours, Danny and I off the sides of our desks. And all we really want is the end goal, whether we're talking about equality or justice or equity or gender-based violence, is for people to be treated with dignity and respect. So I really appreciate all that you're doing. And I do want to just ask a question because I'm curious about your thoughts on something. I am a hockey mom. I'm a sociologist, and I suffered through my son playing hockey. I almost had a mental breakdown, I'm telling you, because I saw the culture and how toxic it was in terms of the social construction of masculinity. And yet my 5-year-old and my 6-year-old, as he grew up, he wanted to continue to play. And I went head to head with the coaches, and so much so that they benched my child, even though he could play well and he could score all the goals, because they hated me. They hated the questions that I asked. They hated me being a pain in the ass. But we missed, not you, as a society, what was so important about the hockey discussion was that there were so many people like me who understood from this either intimate or vague perspective that the culture of hockey in general is somewhat toxic, and not just in terms of what they teach young boys in terms of acting towards girls, or it's what they teach in terms of acting towards each other. In my son's hockey league, they would abuse the other players and tape them to a wall wearing no clothes. Like, things were not okay. And yet I was basically alone in my own community arguing against the coaches and the institution and the everything about hockey, saying, what, like, this is not acceptable. And so I feel like I wish I had more opportunity to talk a little bit more loudly about it at the time, but I feel like it's a window where we could have brought people in that knew from personal experience that what was happening, or what is continuing to happen in the culture of hockey, is just a micro example of what happens at a larger societal level, where young boys are learning to devalue and to disrespect other humans, And so it's a conversation that we could have, we could still use the opportunity to bring people on board to say, how can we get at our young people better? How can we interrupt that culture of, disrespect and violence and competition within hockey, to have them have another narrative or hear something different? Because I know, for years that when my son played, he it was terrible. Like, the coaches would scream and yell and swear, and and then they would turn a blind eye to the kind of just toxic culture that was perpetuated in the dressing room. So I'm just wanting to pick your brains. Any ideas about how we could get to young men and boys in our society to have them hear another narrative? Because that's work that I know Danny and I are really interested in pursuing.
I think that is so much a place where men need to step up and step in. And I have, spoken to hockey teams and spoken to men and run men's groups. And I think that there are moments where my voice and my experience is really valuable. And I think that some things, the inside out is really where it kind of needs to happen. And so, yes, it's important to advocate. And if my child was on a team where those things were happening, I would certainly be disliked by the staff as well. But I think that outside pressure will only do so much. And that is where we need to see that, like, inside out pressure of men who came up in that system and who are like, hey, so that's fucked, right? That's bad. That they have a privilege in those spaces, and can say things that, as outsiders, we kind of can't say. And as women, we can say, but we won't be heard the same way. So I really think that, yeah, there are some moments where men really need to step up and step in, to take those things on. And not just any men, but like hockey men, like coaches, like people who have been through those systems.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you said, Allison and Amanda. Good for you for standing up. I'm sorry that it caused your kid to be benched, but good for you. And I think that that's what needs to continue happening, right? Like, I think we need to continue talking about it. And yeah, we need men to stand up and be a part of that too. And we need to find, like my kid's baseball coach is an amazing human being. And I have never seen examples of what I heard you say, Amanda, on my kids' baseball team, which thank God for that, because I would be in the same position that you would have been. But we need people like that to stand up and use their voice. Locken and Nova right now are co-facilitating a program called Coaching Boys into Men, where both Nelia and Gail, so I know those names don't mean anything to all of you watching, but Gail works here at Locke and Nelia works at Anova, and together they facilitate a training session for coaches at high schools here in London. And it's a whole training session, and I don't know what else to say about it. I got myself into that conversation and I'm like, I don't know how to get out. But
it's about how to have those conversations. So it
yes.
gives tools to the coaches, since they're in those spaces, to call those things out, to give them something to do with that.
Yes. Thank you, Allison, for saving me there. But that is exactly what needs to continue to happen, right? As well as, and Holly, I think you had touched on it before, like education from a very young age. I really feel like sometimes the only way that we are going to tackle any of these systems, whether it's sports or we're talking about the criminal justice system or government, is to completely take it all apart and rebuild it. And we all know that that's not possible. So we need to continue what we're doing.
Yeah, I think I was actually going to say capacity building on top of everything there, right? Like not just for coaches, but for kids too. And there's a lot of really interesting like literature out there, and I've even just seen this in my work with men. If this can be positioned as a leadership issue, if this can be something that calls men into the work, I think that we're really used to talking about the deficits, and there is a time and place. I will never be one to say we don't talk about those, but I think we can also talk about the positives and the positive people and the positive sides of, what does it mean? Because young people are really navigating what does it mean to be a young boy turning into a man? And we have all these ideas about what it is to be a man, and a lot of them can go to a place where it's harmful. And so how do we teach people to navigate like, hey, it's okay if you like things that we associate with manliness. Like it's okay if you like those things. It shouldn't limit you from having emotions. It shouldn't limit you from having empathy. It shouldn't mean that you can't ask for help. It doesn't mean you have to burden this all on your own. And the beliefs that perpetuate more violence between men and men, because also that's where a lot of violence is happening too, are the same beliefs that are justifying men's violence towards women. They're all the same root of you have to be in power and dominating and loud and aggressive. And so I like to ask open-ended questions to people. So for the coach, I'd be like, when you yell at them like that, do you think it motivates them, or do you think it just makes them afraid of you? Would you rather they be fearful or respect you, right? Which one would you prefer? And I think with our kids, we can do similar things. When coach did that, or when so-and-so did that, what were they trying to make you feel? What were they trying to make you do? Is that how you really feel about it? Is that what you really wanted to do? Because then maybe when they do grow up and they are in a situation where there's all this social pressure to conform to something harmful, they can say no, and they can be a leader out of that. And I think at the end of the day, that's the goal. But we have to capacity build, because I even know working with so many men over the years, you hear it a lot about workplaces and you hear it a lot about sports. And it's so deeply ingrained that it does take courage to step out of that. It does take courage to talk about these things in a different way. But a lot of people don't have the language, they don't have the tools for me to say, did you make a safety plan for how you're going to talk about this? Like there's privilege that comes with that because it has time and resources and knowledge. So I think that we have to be willing to meet people where they're at, provide that information. I love to give people like templates for stuff, right? Like, and how to think about something differently, because I have had the privilege of sitting here for like 8 years and thinking about the right wording. So If you're not going to get it right the first time. So I think ask people, how are they trying to make you feel? Was that a good way to make someone feel? How would you want someone to feel? Is that what a leader does? Right? No. So how are we going to be a better leader tomorrow? How can I help you with that? I think these are fantastic questions to just get us to start thinking critically about what to do. And Amanda, good for you for making good trouble. Oh, Jeff, you're muted.
Yeah, back on. Danny, I saw your hand up. Did you want to share something before you wrap up, or?
Well, I'm glad you asked, but I'm thinking that I'm going to take this to the board before I say anything. But I'm pretty confident because Jeff's one of the our board members. But I'm thinking of ways we can elevate that work. One of my favorite things about the Gender Equality Coalition is that our intentional inclusion of men, and Jeff does a lot of that work for us. He does the work you're talking about in Toronto, but I'm thinking there may be a way that we can help elevate some of your work with what Amanda was saying, like in respecting that you guys are the experts. So I'm going to take it to the board. That's where I put my hand down. I'm like, I got to get permission from the board before I commit to something, but I have some ideas.
A great segue to my last. I'm gonna like do like a Mandarin like buffet, like 10 questions in one to wrap it up. But just to quickly mention, um, I got to do a 5-part Instagram live series of conversations with folks after the Hockey Canada trial and the aftermath, with Maddie Brockbank, who's done work with athletes in the Hamilton area for over a decade, young male athletes, uh, Canadian feminist icon Judy Rebick, Kip Bayonne, who is a coach out of Oregon, but works primarily in basketball, but talks to athletes and coaches about rape culture and engaging men in male allies and being allies. Dr. Teresa Fowler, who does incredible research around masculinities and hockey culture out of Edmonton, and Joanna Piakowski, who has done some incredible work in the extended area as well. So you can check those out. So okay, here's the big multi-jumbo question. This isn't rocket science or anything, but just as important. How can we support your work as organizations, as individuals, personally and professionally, however you want to answer that? And also, do you kind of self-carry, or it could be related to the work? Do you have any like favorite video or a reel, a resource or a book you want to you geek out about and kind of promote? Again, it could be related to the work. It could be just your self-care stuff. Yeah. So yeah, how can we support the work that you all do?
I guess I'll start the jumbo buffet. That's okay.
Right.
So, I guess like one thing is, following our socials, engaging with our content. Particularly, I will say Locke and Anova have really good socials. We have good socials too, but like they have really great stuff on there. We're trying to get our socials up there. But beyond that, just engaging with the content, attending events that we plan. Even if you're not in our area, which I completely understand, but finding your local organizations that do that too, showing up, reaching out. We have a lot of people that reach out and just say, how do I get involved? And that means a lot. And I'm not going to take all the answers, but I will just say, even in this conversation, moral distress has come up a lot. Moral distress is when you want to do something and like you can't quite do it the way you know is
Yeah.
best, and it creates that conflict. So if you know anyone doing this work, and maybe it's not gender-based violence, but some version of social justice, social work, studying this even, check in with them, see how they're doing, see how they're impacted and how that moral distress is going, and find those opportunities to check in. And for me, my guilty pleasure is honestly any video, basically to what we were talking about, that's like young little boys doing nice, kind things and like representations of like positive masculinity, because my feed really does go between like the worst examples of abuse. And so when I see that, I go, okay, there's hope, and that was really cute.
Yeah, I would say, follow us on socials. I think more broadly speaking, like advocate for for funding, for sustainable core funding in areas of gender-based violence. Our governments at every level love to say that they love supporting gender-based violence, and yet we are, all of us, wildly underfunded and lacking in like core funding that we need. So those are always my sort of go-tos of like, follow us on social media, and also write your government official. And then my favorite, it's a comic book, but then it was made into a TV show, is Heartstopper. And it's just a gay little boys in love, wholesome masculinity, like these soft little boys who sit next to each other in homeroom and get feelings, and it's cute, and they have supportive friends, and one of them is a rugby player and he's bisexual, and it's a whole thing, and it's just this really beautiful series of like, oh, like soft boys falling in love and like making teenage mistakes, but like this beautiful soft world that I think we are closer to now than we were certainly when I was a teenager, but is still perhaps a little bit of a fantasy. And so, yeah, that's my go-to, both watch and read when I need some softness and some the kids are all right sort of vibes.
I think same as Allison and Holly in terms of like amplifying our voices. So if you're not doing this work, like find something that hooks you and, you know, push for it. Even all of you doing this and having us here is really amazing. And it's like such a good, you know, good thing for you to do. And it's awesome that there are some people that are watching this that maybe have never heard of our organizations before and have now. And you know, we've been saying this the whole time, but like we need increased funding, we need proper legislation, we need like guaranteed livable income, we need to declare intimate partner violence an epidemic. Like there's so many things. Find something that, you know, you want to put your support behind and run with it. And as for me, and those of you that know me know what my answer is going to be, but Taylor Swift. And that's all I have to say about that. And by the way, I love when I get to say Taylor Swift in like meetings and stuff. It just brings me so much joy.
Amazing. And I also appreciate you bringing up Vlad Guerrero wearing Marie-Philip Poulin's jersey. I'm writing a piece about a quick shout out or quick mention for my website, Higher Learning. I'm writing a piece about the Blue Jays and the power of friendship, and they're modeling how being better teammates to yourself and to other men can extend to being better teammates to women and gender expansive people. And I think they modeled that kind of healthy kind of emotional expression, navigating grief, sadness, expressing love. And in Vlad's really significant moment to walk in with the jersey is quite a statement. And a modeling to young men and boys, as you mentioned, Jennifer. So thank you to all our super duper awesome rock star superhero panelists, Holly, Jennifer, and Allison. Thank you to Amanda, Danny, Shreya, and the crew at the Gender Equality Coalition of Ontario. Thank you to everyone who's joined us live or watched the recording. Again, today is the latest. This was the latest in the Gecko Speaker Series. Join us for the next upcoming gatherings throughout 2026. But once again, please join us for the next one in about a month, Wednesday, December 3rd. I'm going to be there. It's in person. The topic will be queer elders, taking a place at the Casso station in St. Thomas at 7 p.m. To register and learn more about the upcoming events Gecko is offering, check out Gecko's Instagram at GenderEQCO or the website, the Gender Equality Coalition of Ontario.org. Whatever you're doing, stay well, be well, stay warm, and continue to be the lesson in action in what you do. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you again to our incredible panelists. Just such gratitude and thankfulness for just you and your colleagues and the work that you all do. It's never thanked enough, and so appreciated. So thank you. And we will see you all. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good night. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Good
everyone.
night.